All right. Thanks again for being here. We are talking about the Midwest Memory Grant opportunity that Forecast has launched. This is the agenda for tonight. I'll talk a little bit about myself and Forecast, and then we'll do an overview of the grant opportunity. We'll talk about eligibility, what your team should look like, what you can expect, what some of the gatherings and learning exchanges will look like, some information about what your project might need to look like, timeline, application, selection criteria, and then hopefully we'll have a good amount of time for questions before we close out at 6. I just want to start by saying that we believe all public art is on Indigenous land. I am coming to you from my home on Dakota land in northeast Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we really think about when we're working on projects, what does it mean as far as who has been the stewards of this land for time immemorial. Forecast Public Art is, well, I'll say, my name is Jen Krava. Hi, I'm the Director of Learning, Grants, and Research here at Forecast. I have been here for about 9 years and have worked on all kinds of projects across the country. But I will share that I was born and grew up in very small towns in rural Minnesota. I was born in Ely, Minnesota in the Arrowhead region. And then I grew up and spent most of my adolescence, I'll say, in a town called New Prague, which is southwest of the Twin Cities. And there were about 7,500 people that lived there when I was there. So I thought it was a pretty small town when I was there. Forecast Public Art is a nonprofit organization. We started in 1978 and are very focused on advancing justice, health, and human dignity through public art. So as a nonprofit organization, we make decisions based on our mission and vision and values. You can see our mission and vision here on the screen. So we've been around for about 46 years, and we do primarily 3 main things. The first is that we support and fund and train artists who work in public space. Our organization was actually started by artists who wanted more opportunities to work in public. And so they were working on a project by project basis, and then started to realize that they were gaining a lot of knowledge doing these projects and wanted to start sharing that out with other folks. And so that is where the second thing that we do comes into play. We partner and consult with folks all over the country on public art and creative placemaking projects, anything from helping find an artist to doing public art master planning or creative placemaking planning for municipalities. And we also run trainings for artists across the country. And then we build local capacity, gather stories, and share research. We have a digital publication called Forward that is focused on how artists are working across sectors to tackle the most challenging issues of our time. So we have had an issue of Forward that was about artists and community safety. We have one about artists and transportation. Our most recent one is about artists and climate change. And we have an issue about artists and monuments and memorials that's coming up as well. If you're not already subscribed for our newsletter, please subscribe on our website because we share the release of new issues through our newsletter. As I said, we work all across the country. This is just where we've been in some recent years. We, as I said, are based in the Midwest, so we've got a lot of partners that we've worked with here in the Midwest, but we have worked from coast to coast, and lucky us, we even got to work in Hawaii. This is our amazing team that will be working on this project. I am super lucky to be the project manager for this, but you can see all of the wonderful people who will be a part of this as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about how all of these folks will be engaged as we go through these slides tonight. So let's talk about the grant. I'm just gonna pull my notes back up here, sorry. So Midwest Memory is an initiative to support the expression, elevation, and preservation of diverse stories through monuments and memorials in Midwest communities through funding and technical assistance. We have generous support from the Mellon Foundation. Could I just ask if you are not muted, please mute yourself. Thank you. We've got really generous support from the Mellon Foundation to launch Midwest Memory, which will fund new monuments that celebrate and preserve diverse stories and prioritize the inclusion of voices and experiences of BIPOC communities and support BIPOC and other practitioners in the rural Midwest. The program will select 8 communities with monument or memorial projects that need support. Again, we'll provide funding, technical assistance, and then there's a collaborative cohort experience that's part of this. I just want to share sort of where this came from. A few years ago, Monument Lab, which you might be familiar with, did a national audit of monuments and memorials to understand who and what is being memorialized. Their audit concluded that monuments have always changed, that the monument landscape is overwhelmingly white and male, that the most common features of American monuments reflect war and conquest, and that the story of the United States as told by our current monuments misrepresents our history, right? Our history is not a monolith at all. We know that what they found is not the full story of our country, right? We know that this is not the full story of our rural Midwestern communities. We also know that resources change depending upon geography and the size of your community. We've worked with several rural communities in the Midwest that are working on monument initiatives and have found a variety of resources and policy capacity and even community interest in these projects. So we're initiating Midwest Memory to provide assistance to those communities who are interested in telling that fuller story and the fuller history of their community, but don't have the funding or resources to make that happen. So the grant is $100,000 plus another 10 to pay cultural advisors. Each of the 8 grantees will receive that funding. And then we'll also offer one-on-one coaching, technical assistance. We'll do some documentation of the projects and the work that you're doing, and also networking opportunities between the 8 grantees to ensure the success of these projects. The initiative also aims to highlight the importance of cross-sector collaboration and contribute rural and Midwestern BIPOC perspectives to the national conversation on monuments and memorials. Another thing that we will be doing is building an online toolkit of resources that other communities can access that did not receive the grant or are not a part of Midwest Memory, so that we're really creating a tool that everyone can access and utilize to help them with their projects as well. Teams must be cross-sector. We'll talk about that in the next slide. We're asking that your team is located in a rural area with less than 25,000 people, and you have to be more than 40 miles from a metropolitan statistical area, which is a geographic area that, you know, basically has a population of 50,000 people or less. If you're not sure if you're within that, let me know and we can do some sussing out and figure out what that means for you. You must be based in and serving the Midwest, and for this we're defining that as the following places. That's Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, Ohio, and the Native nations that serve and share these same geographies. And that was in alphabetical order. We're looking for applicants who are engaging a coalition of community members and organizations to realize their monument or memorial projects. We really believe that those cross-sector teams will help with the sustainability of these projects and any future efforts that might come out of the work that we would do together throughout this grant period. BIPOC and/or Native artists will be essential to supporting these teams, but other team members could include community organizers, historians, government staff, educators, community leaders, folks like that. We do ask that the lead applicant on the team is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we ask that they have a demonstrated commitment to addressing social and racial equity in their community. We're asking for this because we want to know that this is something that you have been working on and sustaining and that this isn't something new. We can provide technical assistance on new projects, but this is really a way for people to connect around something that they've been trying to get off the ground or that they have been initiating. And we know that you're really invested in the values that we share around this project. So at least one of the team members needs to have initiated an effort around monuments or memorials in the community. That could be anything from holding community conversations around a specific monument or memorial that you already have, or doing brainstorming around something that you want to happen in your community. It doesn't have to be where you have actually done a project before or built a monument or memorial, right? We want to know that you have just initiated some sort of effort around monuments and memorials in your community. And then we ask that there's a city or town staff member, a tribal leader, or community leader on your team that has some sort of responsibility over existing and future monuments and memorials. What if you don't have that? That's very much a possibility. What we're really looking for is someone who has decision-making ability and can influence policy. So is there someone in the city or your tribal government that could be a champion for this project with you, or an ambassador for this project with you? That's the person that you would want on your team. If you don't have anyone like that and you are still interested in applying, let me know and we'll strategize together. So that's 2 team members, right? The nonprofit 501c3 organization as the lead applicant, a city or town staff member, tribal leader, community leader, and then there's 3 more people that you'll want to round your team out with. So there will be a total of 5 folks on your team. These 3 team members could be from community groups, they could be artists or historians, they could be academics, they could be culture bearers, other folks throughout the community that are interested in this work. The key, again, is that someone from your team has been involved in initiatives around monuments and memorials in your community. And again, like I said, that could be just initiating conversations, but it could be as far along as developing a policy. The idea is that your team has a project in mind that you've been trying to get off the ground, and you really need some support to do so. When we're thinking about the makeup of the team and the 5 folks who are on it, we're really thinking about them in this way with these bullet points on the screen. Like I said, we've worked with communities across the country of all sizes and demographics, resources, capacities, but what we have found that's similar throughout all of them is that initiatives are the most sustainable when the team is thoughtfully put together and reflects the community in which they're working. We really want these to be long-lasting projects and initiatives for you that could lead to future conversations or policies for your community. So with that in mind, we are requiring all teams to be multiracial and or multi-ethnic. And you could do this by establishing partnerships with local organizations or cultural institutions, community leaders. The goal here is that we're ensuring the authentic representation of your community and diverse narratives in the project that you're working on. We ask that the team represents a diverse cross-section of the community in race and ethnicity, in age, in gender, range of skills, connections to the community. This is really important. Again, this is where that cross-sector stuff comes in, and the reflection of who is in your community, right? Is there a student who is interested in public art and monuments and you want them to be on your team? That is great, right? So think about who makes up your community and how your project team can reflect that. We ask that you are committed to both learning and action. So you're going to produce a project, right? You'll get funding and support to produce a project, but you're also going to participate in a cohort learning experience where you connect with the other grantees who are also from small rural communities in the Midwest, and you will share and learn with each other, right? Something that you are working on may be a challenge, or something that you've already come up against may be a challenge that someone else is currently facing. And there are opportunities for you to learn from each other and how to approach those situations. Again, we ask that someone on your team has initiated an effort around monuments or memorials in your community, and that you really just need that additional support to take it to the next level. I've said this already, but I'm going to say it again. It could be a new monument or memorial that you're thinking about, which is either temporary or permanent, that's fine. It could be recontextualizing an existing monument or memorial that you have in your community. It could be removing something that's already there, or it could even be the updating of policies that affect monuments and memorials in your community. If you don't have a project and you're looking to launch something from scratch, that would not be eligible for this grant program. We'd ask that you demonstrate your current involvement in work around monuments, memorials, public history, and/or public memory in your community. Again, this could be facilitating community conversations if you're advocating for policy change, creating artistic projects that address racial equity in monuments. Maybe you're participating in research around monuments and memorials in your community. We want you to demonstrate to us what sort of initiatives and work you have done around monuments and memorials already. So if you get a grant, there are some things that we will expect from your team. We will expect you to engage a cultural advisor on your team if you haven't already applied with one. Your technical assistance provider, so someone from our team who will give you that technical assistance, will support you through the project with resources and planning and other assistance that you might need, and they can help you identify a cultural advisor if you need help with this. So there's that extra $10,000 that goes directly to that cultural advisor, and so we can help you if you're not sure, who that should be. We can help you figure that out, so they can be a part of your team. A cultural advisor is someone who can support the cultural elements of your project. So that could be someone that holds specific cultural knowledge, is uniquely knowledgeable about traditions that are related to your project. Perhaps they are a language specialist, someone who really holds cultural knowledge that relates to your project and can support those cultural elements. We'll ask that you determine areas where your team could utilize capacity building. So $25,000 of the grant goes to your team to build your capacity. This could be anything from skill development, research and learning around precedent projects, how to advocate for policy change, some project management skills, how to engage community further in your initiatives, even things like how to pay your team for their time and build a budget. Your TA provider can help you figure out what all that capacity building funding can go to, but we ask that you come to that conversation with some ideas because you know your team better than we do. You will need to plan for and implement your project. That's a big goal of this funding and this grant opportunity. We'll ask that you participate in periodic evaluation conversations and/or surveys with us. We'll ask that you engage in some regularly scheduled meetings with Forecast. That really would be the lead applicant who would do that. An example of that would be like onboarding and contracting and what's the sort of admin stuff that needs to happen at the beginning, things like that. We will ask that you will participate in sessions with your technical assistance provider. Again, you get 80 hours of technical assistance from our team. You'll create a plan for your project and identify milestones with them. Again, some of the things that your technical assistance provider could help you with would be helping you figure out a timeline, but also maybe understanding who to talk to related to policy, or help you strategize how to find an artist, or help you facilitate conversations, or even like help you write a grant for more funding for your project. So they'll work with you directly to set up that plan, figure out what kinds of things they can help you with, figure out where you need some more capacity building, and then they will be your person that supports you with those 80 hours throughout this project. We ask that your team participates fully in 2 in-person learning exchanges. There will be one at the beginning of this grant period and one at the end of this grant period. And what we are really hoping to do is have those in 2 of the locations where our grantees are coming from, so that the whole cohort can do tours of the place, understand some of the local context, and just get to know each other in a home space. And then there will be 6 virtual grantee gatherings. We ask that your team participates in those, and those will be quarterly. We'll go through a timeline at the end of the slideshow here. A little bit more about those cohort gatherings and learning exchanges. Those are going to be facilitated by Mallory Roxana Nizam from Justice and Joy, and Tuesday Ryan Hart from The Outside. We have worked with both of these organizations for a long time and are just love the work that they do. The 2 in-person, again, visits with the cohort members will also be led by Mallory and Tuesday, but those will just be in person. The virtual cohort gatherings are going to focus on leadership development and capacity building, along with collective strategizing and action planning for your location and where you live. And then the cohort members will support each other in their respective efforts, further develop the field of practice for monument and memorial transformation across the United States. So that might feel like a big ask and a lot of pressure, but really, we haven't seen anything like this happen elsewhere in the United States, specifically in rural communities. But yet there are people looking for information around this. And so the projects that our grantees will work on will become a source of information and inspiration for other communities across the country. So what does your project have to do? The projects really need to prioritize public memory through research and storytelling, and they need to address systemic inequities and advancing racial justice and Indigenous visibility. So one requirement for your project is that it focuses on addressing deep systemic inequities, advancing racial justice and/or Indigenous visibility. That could be through stories that are being told, changes in policy, right? We ask that public memory and/or public history is the core focus. We also ask that the project shows commitment to amplifying the stories and histories of BIPOC and Native communities and other communities who have been silenced and oppressed in the Midwest, specifically projects that uplift the stories of Black settlers, tribal nations and communities, and immigrants of color. Again, projects could be a new proposed monument that's temporary or permanent, recontextualizing something that already exists in your community, removing something that exists, updating policies around monuments and memorials. Again, it cannot be a new project that you have not been thinking about yet. What is public memory? Let's talk about that briefly. Really, it's ongoing choices that are made when a group of people remembers a particular part of their history, highlights that within a container available for everyone to experience, like a monument or a statue, and then locates that container within a social, cultural, and political context. So really, this definition makes it clear that we're missing parts of our stories and histories, right, within the monuments and memorials that already exist in our communities across the country. So how can we start to layer in the stories that have not been told and that are held in public memory, but are not given the same attention as other stories that have been? So the Midwest Memory Grant is a 20-month-long period. It will officially begin in January 2025, and it will end in October of 2026. During the grant period, again, you'll participate in 2 in-person learning retreats and then 6 virtual meetings with other grantees. You'll get that 80 hours of consultation from our technical assistance providers. And I'll say those technical assistance providers are knowledgeable about a variety of topics, from public art to monuments to cultural organizing to group facilitation. They have so many skills. And so the way that will work is that we'll talk with you and understand what kinds of questions you have, and then pair you with someone that has the knowledge that can help you answer those questions. And as we go through those 80 hours, if you find that there's information that you need or assistance that you need that specific technical assistance provider can't give you, we'll find someone else who can and pair you with them for that part. The retreats and gatherings will be aimed at both the training and increasing capacity for monument work and equitable collaborations, as well as that relationship building among the grantee teams. We really think it's important for the cohort to be able to build relationships together, as you will all be working on projects, at the same time. You might face some similar challenges, you might have some similar successes. And so it is a really great opportunity to build a cohort learning and relationship building experience. And then in addition to that toolkit that we're going to develop, we'll also have a portal that's just for our grantees where we can share information and do things like that. So in January of 2025, that's when that initial meeting will happen between your team and Forecast to develop that 2-year plan. We'll talk about your goals, right? We'll match you with that TA provider and then help you figure out how to use the capacity building and cultural advisor funds. March 2025 is when that first in-person retreat will happen. That will be like the launch of our time together as a cohort. And again, the goal is that will be in one of the 8 communities that are selected for this grant opportunity. And then May 2025 through September 2026 is when you'll implement the project that you applied with. You'll work through that plan with your TA provider. You'll create milestones with them. You'll determine when you're going to check in and what you're going to talk about. You'll have those one-on-one check-ins, and you will actually implement your project that you are seeking the further assistance with to get it off the ground. Those virtual meetings will be as listed out here. They're quarterly. So our first one will be in May of 2025, then August and November of 2025. And then 2026, they'll be in February, May, and August. And then we'll have our closing retreat in October of 2026. Again, that will be in person in one of the communities that the grantee cohort is coming from. Let's talk about the application. So all applications will be on Submittable. We've got a Submittable platform. They will all be due by 11:59 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. I will be in that office that day if you are having any issues with Submittable or your application, but I do suggest that you start it earlier than later. There are 2 phases to the application process. So on Submittable, what you will be submitting is either a written or a video application based on questions that we have, and we'll go through those questions here in a second. We know not everybody is a great writer. You don't have to be a great writer to work on this project. So if it's better for you to do a video application, by all means do that. There's a place where you can submit that in the Submittable. And then our selection team will go through all of those applications, review them, and then a select number of applicants will be asked to do 30-minute virtual interviews that week of October 28th with our selection committee. Then our selection committee will meet, and then everyone who has applied will be notified by November 4th. This is the goal, this timeline. So what does that application look like? The written or video part will ask for a few different things. The first is information about your team. So we're going to ask about the lead applicant. What's the name? Who's the contact person? What's the mission of the organization? Then we want to know how that organization will lead the partnership and facilitate the execution of the project. We want to hear about your community. Where is it? How do you define rural? How many people live there? Just tell us a little bit about where you live and where this project is going to happen. And then we just ask that you list out the other folks who will be on your team. What are their names? What role are they going to play? What's their contact information? Knowing that the lead applicant will really be our main point of contact for this. We'll also ask on the application if 2 of your team members are able to attend that in-person learning exchange. We would prefer that your full team can, but we know that that can be very hard. So we want you to at least have 2 team members that can commit to being a part of those in-person learning exchanges. And then we'll just ask if you're interested in being one of the host destinations for the in-person learning exchanges. That's all funded through Forecast. You don't have to pay for that or anything, but you would be like our local expert and local host. Oops. The next part is information about your project. So we'll ask you first to just give a brief summary of the proposed grant activities in 75 words. What is your project about? If you're awarded funding, we will use that for public announcements, but the panel and the selection committee will also review that. We will also ask you for a description of your project. So those questions are, what is it that you're doing, right? Are you thinking about a new monument? Are you trying to recontextualize something? Is it something else? Is it policy? And then give us a sense of how long you or someone on your team have been thinking about this project and working on it. And then the rest of the questions sort of align with that. Who have you been talking to about the projects? Do you have a proposed location for it? How is it focusing on addressing systemic inequities? How is it advancing racial justice and or Indigenous visibility? Knowing what we know about public memory and public history, how is that rolled into your project as the core focus? And then we'll ask that you explain the project's commitment to amplifying the stories and histories of BIPOC and other communities who have been silenced and oppressed in the Midwest. So tell us about what that commitment looks like in this project. And then on a scale of 1 to 5, where are you at in the process of working on this project? 1 is like you're at the very beginning, but you've already had some conversation. 5 is where you've had lots of conversations, you've been working on a project plan, all of that, like, and now you just need that lift to get you to the next level of actually implementing your project. So in that, just share a little bit about what you've previously accomplished, what your intentions are for the remaining part of your project. Tell us a little bit about monuments and memorials in your community. So we've got a little bit of local context around that. And this really is for you to answer in a way that that shares how you and your community are thinking about monuments and memorials where you live. Talk about how this project will benefit your community, if there are any challenges that you foresee in this, and then if there are any other partners in this work that aren't a part of your team, but you think you'll bring in at some point or that you've talked to before that have played a role, just share a little bit about that with us. None of these are super long answers, so I don't want you to feel like it's going to take you 3 hours to fill out this application. This stuff is probably stuff you already know. And it really, like, you can be concise. Just give us a clear idea of how you're answering all of these and what's been happening. Whoops, sorry. Then we'll ask you for a project budget. We just want to see how you're going to use that $75,000 for your project. If you don't know, it's okay, but give us a sort of idea of, like, we're going to need to build something. We need to pay community members for their time. We know of an artist who wants to work on this. We need to pay them to develop a concept and then to build it. We need money for community events. So you can start listing those things out. We want to know, we just really want to know how you're thinking about all of the things that need to wrap into this project and how that grant funding will be able to support those. And then give us a little bit of idea on how you're thinking about that capacity building, if you've got thoughts around that, and then also around the cultural advisors, right? If you already have someone on your team, that's great, just note that. If you don't and you're going to need help with that, just note that as well, and then we'll make sure that we track that and help you with that part of the process when you receive the grant. We'll ask for a letter of commitment from a city staff member or a tribal leader or a community leader who's going to be on your team. That letter should reflect the support for this project, not just a general endorsement for your organization or the team applying. It's really about this project. I do not want that to be a barrier. It could be hard to get a letter of commitment from someone. So if you're not sure about how that might work, please let me know and we can strategize together on how you can do that. Again, it does not have to be a person in government. It could be someone in your community that knows that you're working on this project, is going to be on your team, and knows and can speak to your dedication to this project. And then there's a place where you can upload supplementary materials if you want to. You do not have to. This is totally optional. But if you have photos of events that you've already held, or maps or policies that you've worked on, articles about your project, things like that that you just want us to know about, you can upload those. If you do not have any, that is totally okay. This is not one of the criterion that you will be that your grant application will be scored against. Oops. The criteria that your application will be scored against are on the screen. So the first, and these should look familiar based on some of the conversation we've already had. The first is that you have a monument or public memory project that focuses on addressing systemic inequities, advancing racial justice and/or Indigenous visibility, that the team has a commitment to amplifying the stories and histories of BIPOC and other communities who have been silenced and oppressed in the Midwest, specifically projects that uplift the stories of Black settlers, tribal nations and communities, and immigrants of color. We want, the jury will be looking at your grant through a lens of the commitment and ability to meet expectations that your team has, right? That you're able to commit to this over the 20-month period of the grant, that you will be participating in everything, and that you've got an idea of what your project is. And then we're really thinking about your team makeup, right? And that cross-sector team makeup, and that it represents that diverse cross-section of your community in race and ethnicity, in age, in gender, in range of skills, and in connections to the community. My email address is on the top here, jenk@forecastpublicart.org. Teresa@forecastpublicart.org is the email address for Teresa Sweetland, who is our executive director. I'm the main contact, but Teresa is also support. I'm actually going out of the country for the next 2 weeks. And so if you get my out of office, you should email Teresa and she can help you while I am out. We don't want you to feel like you can't get support while I am out of the office. So Teresa is here to help you.